Hey everyone, it's Jasmine from Jasmine's Astrology, but you can call me Jay. And for today's video, I'm going to chat about Mars in Cancer. First things first, though, I want to apologize ahead of time if there are any audio issues. I've recorded a couple of times and I've noticed some glitching from the microphone. It's almost as if Mars, who likes to cut, is cutting my words, Gemini, air sign. So it's like one last little hurrah for Mars in Gemini as I record this. So apologies in advance. And, let's move on to Mars in Cancer because by the time you're watching this, we will have finished, we will have made it through the Mars and Gemini transit. Mars moved into Cancer on March 25th. And I think it's a pretty big deal. I know we had, both Pluto and Saturn changing signs this month, and those were epic shifts to be sure. But there's something particularly potent to me about Mars, this planet that likes to move fast and direct, being unable to do so for such a prolonged period of time. Mars was really dispersed and scattered and often stretched way too thin under the mutable energy of Gemini. And then because of the retrograde cycle, it also had to move slowly backwards and it had to retread familiar ground more than once. And none of those things are Mars's favorite things to do. It was kind of uninterested in doing all of that. It was frustrated. And in my experience, that really made for some agitating energy levels, agitation in moods. It was really overstimulating and it felt really exhausting some days. Mars is very hot in its nature, and so it can create inflammation, it can create friction. And I think feeling that heat for such a long time in just one area of our chart, of our lives, um, can be and was really draining. And I think it left things feeling a little parched and crispy. So if you do feel like your mental processes and your communication and your nervous system are just a little bit on edge, just a little bit fried, it could possibly be because Mars has been agitating and stimulating things in the realm of air, Gemini being an air sign since August 20th of 2022. So since forever ago, like for our whole lives, Mars has been in Gemini. That's certainly what it feels like. So for me, I definitely think that Mars wrapping up its time in Gemini is something to acknowledge, something to feel relieved about. And it's kind of like any other weather pattern that's overstayed its welcome. I mean, I love summer so much. I love a good heat wave, but all good heat waves have to break. Um, Now, what's not ideal is when those heat waves break and then all of a sudden we just get like 2 weeks of rain. We're kind of just trading one weather pattern for the other, and there's not enough nuance and change. And that's kind of what we're doing here with Mars moving into Cancer, where it will be for 2 months. Now, a typical Mars cycle or transit only lasts 6 weeks. So we can really see that Mars is still recuperating and recovering from its time in Gemini. It's still picking up its speed. And though it will regain some of that pace during its time in Cancer, it's still not going to be the ideal environment for this planet. And that's because Cancer is the sign of Mars's fall. And so it will still have some difficulty in fully or clearly expressing itself. If we consider the crab, which is the animal connected with Cancer, we know that crabs don't move. They don't move directly ahead like in a straight line. They move side to side. So while they do move ahead and they do make progress, they do so in a way that is not ideal for Mars, who again just wants to move in a straight line directly ahead. Let's get going. So and then add to that, that Cancer is a water sign, and water signs just sort of tend to slow the pace in general. So Mars does have a lot of counteraction to deal with while in the sign of Cancer. Now, Mars in Cancer, our mood and our emotions are going to have a very big impact on our energy levels and our motivation. And since moods and emotions tend to really fluctuate, we'll likely see days where we do have a lot of drive and a lot of momentum, and other days where it feels better to slow down and give ourselves some space and a little bit of extra tenderness. We may find that inspiration comes from emotional encounters, or that, like that TV show that always makes you cry, it might have a little bit more of an intense impact in helping you to take action somehow. Like it's just those moods and those emotions are inspiring, they're motivating, or they're really not. And they kind of just like keep us in our little shells for a day or so. And it's going to be really important to listen to and follow our moods and emotions at this time, like as much as possible, because this version of Mars really wants to feel safe and secure before it moves forward. So if we try to push ourselves before we're really ready, we're just going to do damage to ourselves and possibly others as well. We are going to want to feel needed with Mars in Cancer, and that will also likely impact the actions that we take or don't take. And when we interact with others, we'll want to appeal to their emotional sides, not in a manipulative way. And we obviously want to be cognizant that we're not just emotionally manipulating somebody. I feel like that might be a difficulty with Mars and Cancer. Like it might be something that we slip into, not meaning to. So we want to be aware, but we want to appeal to somebody's emotional side in a way that actually creates connection between us and them. We want something that creates a mutual understanding that you can only really achieve on that felt sense. And I think that also inspires and motivates and gets our energy moving while Mars is in Cancer. Now, I do also wonder if we should maybe prepare for some level of emotional flooding or overwhelm. This combo can be quite sensitive. It's spicy, but it's sensitive. Now I say I wonder because, if we were still in Pisces season and we still had, multiple planets in Pisces, I wouldn't be wondering. The amount of water energy in the cosmos would be great enough that I'd be like, yeah, I think we're definitely going to feel emotionally overwhelmed. But at this point, we have moved into Aries season. There are some planets in Taurus as well. So I do wonder if that will help to balance things out in a way. With that said, we will still have both malefics in a water sign. So, of course, Saturn having just moved into Pisces earlier in March, and then Mars moving into Cancer. And that's definitely something worth watching. I feel like we might be navigating some tougher emotions. We might experience a stirring up of emotions from the past. Perhaps we might encounter some feelings that really cut deep, especially with Mars in Cancer. Again, that cutting, um, all of which can have us acting on the defensive. And Mars in Cancer is very much about defense and protection. It can be a transit that really highlights areas in which we don't feel safe or secure, where we don't feel we can be tender or vulnerable. And I think it's in those areas that we might tend to just act defensive more instinctively because we're trying to protect that tenderness or that vulnerability, or we're trying to act on the defensive because, we don't feel secure enough, right? So it's a good transit to sort of explore all of those emotions when they come up and then really determine, like, okay, how do I further protect those areas of life or those people, those relationships represented by those areas of life? And that includes ourselves too. Now, despite being unable to fully express itself, Mars will still bring some energy and some motivation, some confidence, and even a better ability to assert ourselves to our Cancer house topics and relationships. And this part of life might actually be really craving that boost at this point as well, because the last time we had Mars in Cancer was between like late April to mid June of 2021. So that's a long time since that area of our chart, that area of our lives has been able to experience that boost from Mars. So we do really want to take advantage of that, especially on the days when we are feeling the drive and the momentum to make that progress. Cancer does have a connection with roots and ancestry. And so we may find that our understanding or the understanding of our own histories um, and where we come from, or developing some kind of connection with our roots, with our ancestry, can really help us to understand and pursue our current desires and drives. And maybe it also helps us to establish and determine what those drives and desires even are. It's just that understanding that, that root system, that thing of where we come from, and it doesn't necessarily have to be biological. It could be your found family and the traditions that you've made with your found family, but like digging into like, oh, how did we get to that? Like, how did that start becoming a thing between us? And feeling a deeper connection with those things, I think helps us to better understand our motivation and our desires while Mars is in Cancer. It's always good to find some sort of outlet for Mars energy. Mars loves a job. Mars loves being able to set out on a task and achieve something. And while Mars was in Gemini, what I found really helpful were the practices that helped to soothe my mental health and my nervous system. So, especially when it was still nice out, like getting outside was really therapeutic. Disconnecting from my phone and social media, getting to sleep at a better time as much as I possibly could, drinking more water, all of that was super helpful. I think some of that will carry over because Mars is still recovering from that transit. But I think also we need to add things that help us to release those big emotions and those excess emotions, like crying. So, putting on a show that you know will make you cry to get that release, screaming into your pillow. I mean, honestly, it really is whatever helps you to channel anger and rage and sadness and anything that feels really big and overwhelming, just to get it out, because emotional outbursts are absolutely possible with this combination. And maybe they need to happen. Maybe it's a situation where things were only going to move forward with an emotional outburst. But honestly, I think trying to mitigate that from happening in an interaction, in a relationship, and instead like channeling a lot of it out so that conversations can be a little more straightforward, not lacking emotion, but a little more straightforward, I think might be beneficial. So finding ways to get it out will be good. Water related exercises or practices might also be helpful. So, things like swimming or even going to the sauna or something. You do want to watch out for water related injuries while Mars is in Cancer, especially if you are an Aries, Cancer, or Scorpio rising. Mars transits for Aries and Scorpio will at least be always a little more impactful. And then if you're Cancer rising, it's going through your first house, and that's, your body and your appearance. So, definitely don't go out and try like a new water sport or something, but stick to what you know, be cautious, be aware, staying hydrated. That's a good choice. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the first aspect that Mars is going to make during its transit in Cancer, and that's a trine with Saturn in Pisces. So interesting to me that, the one malefic is meeting up with the other malefic, and they've both just moved into water signs. I think this might also help us determine where we can direct our excess Mars energy, because I really see this aspect as Mars in Cancer being of service to Saturn in Pisces. So we might want to ask ourselves, like, how might the topics of my Cancer house be supportive of the long term goals and growth of my Pisces house? So, like, how can we use Mars's enthusiasm and passion to serve Saturn's priority of providing long term protection and stability? And in return for Mars sort of giving its daily effort and energy towards the Pisces house things in a Cancer house way, You definitely got to look at your chart for this. In return, I think Saturn can really offer some wisdom and insight to Mars on how to best navigate this transit through the sign of its fall. Saturn tends to bring a narrowing, a focusing, and a clarifying energy. And by making us aware of our limits and the depth of our resources, such as time and energy, I think Saturn can help us to ensure that those Mars efforts and energy are actually being directed in the right places. So, this trine happens on March 30th at 2 degrees of Cancer and Pisces. And it'll be something to pay extra attention to, I think, if you have planets or points at 2 degrees of Pisces or Cancer, and maybe even Scorpio, because that will form a trine with your own personal planets, which is a very beneficial and helpful aspect. So, to recap, Mars will be in Cancer from March 25th to May 20th. It's a time when mood greatly affects motivation, a time when we may discover areas of life in which we don't feel enough safety and security. We'll want to make sure we're channeling our emotional energy out somehow so that we can avoid emotional outbursts. Just remember, like, spicy and sensitive. Um, and we'll want to direct our defensive and protective energies to the areas of life that actually need it, or even towards groups in society or in our communities that are lacking those kind of fundamental protections. We can put our energy towards those efforts as well. We'll want to take advantage of the boost that Mars is bringing to our Cancer house. We'll want to consider how our Cancer house topics might be able to support our Pisces house topics and vice versa. Okay, well, that is all I've got for today. I hope this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments. Are you also so stoked to be done with Mars and Gemini and also just feeling kind of meh about Mars and Cancer, but gonna do our best with it, right? Let me know how you're feeling. If you feel like sharing, let us know where Cancer is in your chart and what you're kind of anticipating from this transit. If you need a refresher on the house topics, you will find a link to a PDF for that in this video description. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate a like and a subscribe. But either way, I'm super grateful that you're here and that you're watching. And until we meet again, I'll catch you in the cosmos.